we have Brian Gale on the telephone with us now. Brian, welcome to the broadcast. I thank you for being here. Tell us what happened that night. You are charged with 6 very serious felonies, including murder, manslaughter, etc. What happened?
Thank you, ma'am. Well, we went on we scouted the wild turkey. That was the whole purpose of the trip. We had went the day before, and we put out some corn for hogs and / turkey, and at some private property that I manage.
Right. And
shot the high-powered rifles at some targets at long range, and we had a blast. And the next day, we asked him if he wanted to go. He said yes, and so we went back out. I said, well, I knew there wouldn't be any hogs on the corn, so I said, well, we'll do some turkey seasons, 2 weeks off. We'll do a little bit of scouting down on the state property.
Now, Brian, you know what I noticed about your stepson? He was about 5'10" or so and weighed 117 pounds. So he was a tall, thin, lanky kid. You left him. You left him in the woods all alone. And I read you said that was probably the worst decision you ever made in your life.
Yes, it was. But at the time, ma'am, it had got dark. Daniel couldn't walk, and I was having to carry him. And I made it. Actually, the worst decision was I had made a fire when he was leaning up against a tree. He kept wanting to rest. I said, "Son, it's getting dark. We need to head on out." Mm-hmm. And I seen, he's just something was wrong with him, and I said, well, I started making a fire. I actually had a fire going. And that's before we ever got wet, before we even got down in the deep part of the swamp. I made a fire, and I started looking around for palm fronds and cut them. I knew where we were at the time, on what ridge we were, the hammock ridge we was on, and I knew that the quickest way back to the truck was about a half mile through swamp, and this is a proper swamp. This is a very difficult terrain.
Right, I read about it. Very sloggy with your boots on and whatnot.
On the east coast of the United States, it's probably the last wilderness area, the size of Okefenokee or down in Florida.
Now, Brian,
this thing was huge.
I want to be sure to ask you certain questions because we're running out of time. But let me ask you this: so you leave him at a tree, yet when they find him, he's face down in the water.
But see, you're not. When we started to walk out to try to get straight to the truck, was a straight shot. Mm-hmm. Back to the truck. We went through some actual swamp, and I was Daniel couldn't. He kept falling, so I had to drop my steady stick. Without a steady stick, you can't walk in the swamp.
Right.
Because you're going to be falling, and I had to start carrying him. I had to put the light in my mouth. Had the GPS in my left hand, and we was under a canopy, and it kept losing the signal. And when I was carrying Daniel, we kept falling. And it was cold, and when I hit the water, it just took everything out of me the first time I hit the water.
What do you think, Brian, happened to cause him to leave the tree and be found face down in the water when the rescue workers came? What happened?
Well, we were going for like 7 hours, at least 6 to 7 hours. I toted Daniel, and we made the supreme physical effort to try to break out. And the GPS. I regret having it and not having a backup compass. I wouldn't be sitting here in this position right now if I had a backup compass, or I wouldn't have left that fire. My first instinct was to stay at the fire when it was getting dark and not move. And I regret that, and I always will. And I know that was my mistake. But after we made the decision, the commitment to try to get back to the truck, and we got turned around, I had no choice but to keep moving with him, and we got back too far to the southwest.
Right. Brian, hang on a minute. Brian, hang on just a second. I hear the pain and the emotion in Brian's voice, Susan. Could this just have all been a horrible, horrible accident, and that he shouldn't have been charged with murder?
It was a preventable accident.
It's very emotional to hear his story.
I hear his story. I hear it very much. I hear the pain in his voice, I do, and I sympathise with him. He not only You know, he feels like he's a victim here. I have a life sentence, as does my child, my oldest child, Christopher, of never seeing my son again. There isn't a second of a minute of an hour of a day that I don't think about how my son died.